Hi, Tara.
Hey, how are you?
Oh. Oh, we got this. Tara, I sent you.
Is Paul going to be here?
Recommended actions, I marked up with a few comments on there in Adobe, okay?
Will you be bringing them up tonight as well? I didn't have a chance to look at the last couple hours of emails, so.
I will bring them up tonight. I sent them to you about 3 or 4 hours ago. So.
Okay, I gave myself the afternoon off to ski for my birthday.
Nice.
Birthday.
Happy birthday.
Congratulations. How much snow did you get?
It's getting pretty thin here.
Yeah, we got about 3 inches here last night, so.
Just enough,
Your package.
just
right
enough
over
that I
there.
had a snow blow. Hi, Kelly.
How are you? Nice to see you.
Good to be seen.
Nice to see you as well, Tom. It's been a while.
Oh,
Hi,
please.
Tara.
Hi.
So,
You're doing well.
He's vertical.
And glad to see it. Glad to hear.
He's not horizontal.
you said that Amy wasn't.
But
gonna be
at
up
least for the moment.
He is not, no.
I spent all day
We have
last
a
week at the Winter Carnival. We did Buck a Puck.
Oh, yes. And I was so busy, I never even made it down to say hi.
It-
We
Well,
get started.
well,
6 o'clock.
Rich and Scott,
Yes.
they retrieved 1,200 pucks. I collected 1,200 bucks.
Wow.
I mean, it was a huge success.
Yes.
Okay,
I needed a bigger cash box.
I'll call the meeting to order. It's 6:03 p.m. For March 2nd.
I'm gonna move down one then.
March, yes.
It is March.
Hurry, summer.
So any additions or to the agenda? Let's see, we're going to talk about chapter 3, and talk about the action plan format. Photos. Working on getting master plan committee volunteers. Talked about this additional meeting for this month. I think that's what Tara means. To catch up, or maybe early.
For,
maybe- or maybe
later,
April.
yeah.
Okay, and if any of them shows up.
Yep. Yeah, I don't have any changes to the agenda.
I will make a motion, we accept the agenda as presented.
I second.
Seconded by Kelly. All those in favor?
Hi.
So we talked about potentially getting a new chairperson to replace me. I think Kelly would make a great chairperson.
So,
I don't know if hear you talk about that a little bit.
I have no problem being the chairperson. I would look forward to it. Are you sure you don't want to stay on though? I'm not a
I'll be
planning
on
board
the-
member.
I'll be on the committee, but I just don't want to chair the.
Okay.
Sure.
Oh, that's fine. I just didn't, I was just kind of getting a
Oh,
feel
no,
for.
I want to see this.
Whatever
stuff.
help you need, you ask.
I realize that. You guys are all really great about that. So
But I like your leadership skills, so.
I appreciate that. Thank you. I
you'll
feel
be
like
at-
I'm good, but sometimes I feel I waver in my own, assessment of myself sometimes. So no, I would gladly accept the chair
We're, I
position.
think, amongst a group of people who think very much alike.
I think so.
So that, we're here not for ourselves, but for the town.
Yes. Yes.
So I'd like to make a motion. Can I do that?
You can, yep.
To appoint Kelly Sullivan as to be chair of this committee.
I'll second.
it.
Got beat by Bob.
You guys want to
Okay,
fight?
That's all right. These youngsters are much faster.
Any discussion? Further discussion?
No, I think it's a great idea, really, because I think,
I welcome your wisdom.
Yeah,
That's all I can
well,
say. So thank you.
It also is, it's the opportunity to transfer
Yes,
knowledge to the next generations.
and it is
You are the
important.
Your group is the future of the leadership in this town.
Yes,
And the more knowledge you have behind you, the better off you are.
I agree. So thank you.
So with that, any other comments? Oh, okay, all those in favor?
I,
Opposed?
Okay.
It depends on when you'd like to take over. So.
After this meeting,
After
since
this
this is your chapter, you're going to own this one anyway. So I'm just going to let you run with it, Russ, which I do want to say, I read the chapter and it was really,
You like it?
really fantastic job.
Okay.
Yeah, really
And,
good job,
Sarah did
thorough.
a lot of work on it too. We kind of, I put stuff in there that had to go in other places.
Yeah,
Especially with regard to, I guess you said, Tara, some of it would go to infrastructure or to facilities. When you,
Yeah, I mean, I think it was definitely a joint effort and hopefully it ended up not being that apparent that two different people wrote it. That was my goal.
but anyway, but there's an action plan that goes along with it. So the way we started it was, what did the town say they felt about natural resources and scenic values and historic and all that? And we're gonna have the historic piece coming too. And then we said, so that's what they wanted. That's their vision and goals. This is the condition that we have today. What needs to be done?
okay.
So that, what would we recommend to get to that vision? given
And I
what
did
we
see
have?
that there were steps, like maybe we could do this or things
Right.
like that. So that was
And it
good.
was all couched in what, we have to do that, or it wasn't specific. It said you need to consider,
Mhm.
and then who, and then.
Right, because it's not our job to tell them
Right.
what they have to do, but to just let people be aware that maybe we feel you should do this type thing.
So the action plan format is something we probably want to talk about tonight.
Okay,
And in there's some specific things, and I had some suggestions that I sent off to Tara today, especially about wetland buffers and things like that.
okay.
But in any case, how do you want to do this? One of the things I want to flesh out tonight, Tara, if we can, is how do we review things? How do we keep control of versions? So where people are looking at the right version of the document, if we're asking people to review it, and how version control, how do you propose we do that?
Well, I think it should always come from me. I'm building the plan for you.
Right.
And I think we had that one miscommunication with Carol, but I think we're all good on that now.
But if so, everything, you'll be sending out things, we want you to review this,
Right?
and then you want to get them back. Now, there's two formats. One could be Adobe, and the other one could be Word, a red line strikeout in Microsoft Word, right?
Well, I mean, for the most part, I'm gonna be like you have a different lens because I worked with you on chapter 3. Right? The next one that comes out, I'm doing it by picking Tom's brain on the phone mostly. I did that for an hour yesterday and some emails earlier, and we're gonna do some more of that. But I'm writing all of that, and then I'll send it out, and then we'll have a meeting like this, right, on April 6th to talk about it. If there are proofreading, editorial kind of comments, people could send them to me in between in any format they want, whether, I can always send out a Word and a PDF so people can do whatever's easiest for them. What I try to avoid, because I've had this happen, is everybody sending me edits that just rewords it to be how they would have written it. And that gets costly and it takes the time and money away from other things. So you'd want to keep that to just, I found these typos because your eyesight's terrible, which I'll admit it is. And that's, that's just kind of a heads up that I'm happy to have people send me their corrections and proofreading type things in between meetings or before the meeting, but you want to keep the number of revisions to a minimum, right? I'll make one round of revisions to each chapter when you're done talking about it. And when you're done talking about the action plan section that goes with it, because when you talk about those recommendations and you land in a little different place than the first draft I sent out, I want to go back to the narrative and adjust that accordingly, because we need to go together. We can't say in the narrative, well, gosh, the town needs blah, 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 but then we don't recommend anything that goes with it. So when you've gone through, when you've had a chance to talk about each chapter and its action plan segment, then I'll make a second draft and we'll, like we did with chapters 1 and 2, we'll have a meeting where I've done those changes in red line and strikeout so that you can approve the corrections and revisions.
Okay.
So when you get another draft, I'll have highlighted the changes between drafts, so you can just zone in on those changes if you want to.
Okay.
Yeah, and I don't expect that we want to go on back and forth, back and forth. You can't do that. It needs to be done
Yeah.
in probably this next round for this. This one should be done in the next round. I noticed that you have notes on remaining work to be done. I thought that maybe tonight we could focus on those unless there's people have some specific things. Actually, I don't want to go over like edits tonight. I think if you have edits that you feel are important, send them to Tara.
Well, I guess that I'd like to avoid that. I think people should be talking about their edits tonight and bring a consensus, and then I know which changes to make. Because I could get two completely different set of edits, unless it's something like typos, that's fine to send me, but Kelly might not be happy with something I wrote in one section, and you might feel strongly about it because you wrote it, Russ. So I think that's a conversation you need to have at the table tonight.
And I agree with that. For any chapter, I don't really have any edits to this. This is not my forte. So when I read it, I thought it read very well. I thought it was pretty comprehensive. I maybe saw one typo, and then I had a question about which wasn't even about this specifically, but more about on the last page. I had just a question about the tax format. So really, I thought it was very comprehensive. The mapping was wonderful, and I liked everything about it. So that's just me.
I had one for discussion.
Just Russ, I think that you and I can work together on those missing pieces that I had in brackets.
Okay, fine. The other thing that I did, I'm not gonna, the way I approached this for tonight was to look at the recommendations.
Yeah.
And that's why I focused on that. So what we'll do is, if you agree on what I had for changes in the recommendations, then that would alter the text. That's all. Because it kind of goes back. I think you took out some things I think that I had in there that I think we ought to agree to disagree or something. But
Okay. So I know Bob has something he wants to discuss, and I just want so maybe Tara should lead us off. Where do you want us to start? Are we just going over it like paragraph by paragraph, or?
I'd like to go through it like we did chapters 1 and 2 with, a section at a time.
Okay.
And just so that we need to all leave the meeting with the same understanding of what that second draft is going to look like.
Okay.
So there were also some comments. I had sent it to Jean because I thought that you'd want the Conservation Commission to chime in on the action plan, right, from a policy standpoint.
Yeah.
He had also sent some editing comments that I haven't really looked at closely, but if any of them are corrections, I'll incorporate those as well at the same time. But again, I want to make all the changes at once because it's a lot it's just a lot of wasted time if you do multiple edits, because you have to kind of find your place and get your head around it and all.
And I agree. So how would you like to go over this then, Russ? You want to just start?
Oh, she wants to do it section by section, so surface waters, anything, you have anything on the first piece, I guess? Unless, Tara, you want to lead us through it.
No, I'll chime in if I have questions, but
Okay.
So
So-
the first section is just talking about what we have out there
Mhm.
for surface water. Under water resource, I'm down there, I'm sorry. The introduction was the setup, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I don't know if anybody have any comments on that?
Sounded good.
That came right out of the vision, basically.
Yep. I thought
yeah,
so.
Gene did. He didn't understand why it leapt to the history, but that's because we don't have our historic resources section in here yet. So that will make more sense to him later.
So, I mean, one of the things that, one of the big things that we pointed out was that being business friendly and conservation minded, we want to make that point that they actually complement each other.
Mhm.
Yeah, and that was definitely pointed out in the questionnaire.
So, under water resources, the surface water is just to really, what do we have for surface water? What, the lakes, the ponds, the connectivity, where does the water flow? And it's really just a description of that.
I have a general comment.
Yeah,
There are a number of terms throughout here, which are fairly, I guess, assumed by us. But I think at some point, we may want to consider a glossary of terms. Surface water being, that could be interpreted in a number of different ways. And I'm not sure that that would be something that you want to more clearly identify. I know there are some other terms in here which I didn't understand at all, but I
Well,
think
if you-
in general, we might want to consider that there be a glossary.
Glossary of terms.
Maybe for the whole plan. I'm not sure.
What do you-
Something to keep in mind.
I'd rather see you tell me that I need to say things in simpler language and put more explanatory text in, because we don't want it to be like like an academic paper. We want it to be really readable. We want every section of it to be really readable. So
I would say
Maybe there are
this.
some footnotes. that-
I would say, well, so to your point, Bob, if I am interested in something enough to like a master plan and I'm going to take it out and read it, I'm going to be diligent enough that if I don't understand a term that I'm reading, I'm going to look it up to know it. That's just me. Like,
But
So-
you want the master plan to be readable
yes.
rather than to be a document that is hard to understand.
No, and I understand, and to Tara's point, I would much rather be explained in easier terms than to have a separate context of explaining more. I'm just saying, though, that some things, like, if we were to create a glossary, I mean, we could list a number of words in there, so I'm just saying, like, how about this, then, if we go through it section by section, and there was one word that was really difficult for somebody to pick up, we'll kind of see if we can tackle that at that time and maybe.
Oh, I found one. Stratified drift aquifer.
huh,
That's a very simple one.
okay, I'm writing it down. I mean, anything like that, just let me know and I'll add a sentence.
in the groundwater section, there tends to be a little more technical terms
Yes.
than there is in the
Yes,
surface.
and I understood that, and I only understand certain things of it because of the nature of my business. So somebody else that is,
So one of the things that Tara caught in the first paragraph on page 3.3, the last sentence, there was so far the soils, although well drained, especially around Alton Bay, appear to have prevented any significant impacts on lake water quality. So in other words, we have subsurface disposal systems. And even though they're discharging into sand and gravel here, they're not really, we're not seeing them breaking out
Hmm.
and hitting surface water, so.
Well, one of the things I wanted to mention was, and I don't think anybody else in town knows about it, but in 1973, there was a warrant article passed that no phosphate product could be sold in town.
Wow.
The thing is, nobody knows it. Penny Jones was the only other person who, when she was town clerk, knew about it. So, you know, one of the problems we have in the water is phosphates. So that if that's something that needs to be dealt with, if it is really a problem.
Well, if you read the second paragraph on that page, Tom, 3.3, we do talk about that Alton Bay itself is mesotrophic and that means, you know, Tara went on to explain that that's fair water quality based on average phosphorus levels.
Hmm.
So, you know, we are addressing the phosphorus problem and talking about it in here.
Yeah, well, it needs to be mentioned simply because the point that she mentioned that is the critical factor is the shift from summer to year-round usage
Hmm.
with a lot of structures that don't necessarily have up-to-date systems.
So, and then this goes on to pick up on the Merrimack River and Lake Watershed Management Plan that was done in 2019 and talks about how the cyanobacteria and algal blooms were set off by some of the phosphorus content that we had in sediments.
Some of that was coming from fish hatchery.
Hmm.
Well, I was
That
gonna
was the first
mention
thing I
that.
thought.
Is it reasonable to mention the dependency we have on the fish hatchery?
Yeah,
I mean, there should be some statement in there.
I
It
mean,
says
well,
that that's the source of the difficulty.
there was quite
It's
a
actually not.
to do about
so,
I know.
the correctional work that they had to do.
Anyway, if you go, if there's if it's unreadable or it's not understandable, we need to kind of know that.
I read it and I was okay. So I didn't have any
Yeah,
tearing.
It's very readable.
I thought so.
I had a note to reword that sentence you mentioned, Russ, about the well-drained soils. I put that in pretty much how it came from one of the interviews I did early on, but I really didn't like the way it came out because the well-drained soils are what prevent the systems from failing, but septic systems aren't really even designed to keep nutrients out of the water. And so I think that needs probably to be broken out into a couple of sentences because the concentration of homes and the conversion from seasonal to year round is definitely increasing the nutrient loading. And that really is, you know, it's a separate issue from you've been lucky that the systems haven't failed because things drain well.
It is a huge issue. I do know that it was discussed more later on.
Well, I think that we need to make it'd be important to talk about the bay versus the rest of the shoreline because the rest of the shoreline, for the most part, does not have the concentration that the bay does as far as subsurface disposal and the packing in of all the cottages. And in the 1970s, and we mentioned this here, there was a Lakeshore Residential District was imposed so that you couldn't have, what was happening was like States Landing over in Molten Borough, where you had big subdivisions up back and they shared just a little piece of waterfront.
Yeah,
Hmm.
funnel development.
Yeah. And so the Lakeshore Residential District stopped that in Alton. There's a few of them that were left over from before, like out on Farmington Road.
Hmm.
You know, there's some shared beach areas and things like that, but there's not much in Alton compared to the rest of the lake. So,
Oh, yeah, no.
There are a few,
but they predated the Lakeshore Residential District.
But the things which are grandfathered, they could be the source of some difficulty over the next 10 years. I don't know if that's part of a study we want to propose to have done when we get to the infrastructure section. I think taking some samples along the bay wouldn't be an outrageous thing
Well,
to
we
do.
have that as a-
Doesn't Lay Lake monitoring still work or not?
Lay Lake monitoring, we're gonna just start up again. The Conservation Commission's gonna do that.
Yes, I
It
did see
stopped.
that.
Oh, yeah, the guy who was doing it didn't want to do it anymore and we never got it going. again. So the last report was
Klaus,
2017, so.
Klaus actually donated a lot of money and he died, unfortunately. He was the head of the chemistry department at Harvard.
So we talk about that in here, at the bottom of the last paragraph of 33. So if that doesn't do it for you, maybe let us know. But there's two things, and I think, Tara, I think, and I saw it in the action items, the Lake Host Program and the Lay Lake Monitoring Program have been conflated a little bit. So they need to be pulled apart because they're two different programs. The Lake Host Program is making sure people aren't carrying milfoil in their bilge water of their boat.
Yeah.
Right.
The Lay Lake Monitoring Program is a water quality monitoring program. We're doing water column sampling in the lake itself, so.
Yes, I know that, so I'll look for where I might have written it wrong.
Yeah, it's a little conflated and it was also in the recommendation, so. Yeah.
I thought I had each in the action plan, but separately.
I have a question on I guess it would be 3.5, the first map, pervious cover.
Okay, well,
But yeah, we.
let's go to 3.4 first.
Yeah, let's go page
Can we
3,
do that?
4. And then we'll get back up. So then we talked about the Lakeshore Residential Zone in the 1970s. And then there was a Shoreland Protection Overlay District. But as Tara points out, this is sort of just shadows what it cedes all its authority to the state, and the state's program has gotten weaker and weaker
Yep.
as we go along. So I don't know if we picked that up as a recommendation that we should think about having our own locally
Equivalent to
enforceable.
shoreline protection.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing that's happening is this impervious surface
Yep.
being used because they're not maintained.
And also the lawns to the grass.
Well, the thing is, you're getting so much impervious surface that, and the driveways are now being counted as pervious.
Hmm.
And after 2 or 3 years, they're impervious because they silt up and nobody cleans them out. So they're not working.
Hmm.
So we're allowing lots to put much more massive buildings on them. And we're having more runoff. And then to Tom's point, they run across the lawns. All that water goes across the lawn and into the lake. So anyway, Tara made the point that the Shoreland Water Quality Protection Act that basically Alton said, we're going to have an ordinance and say, you just got to do what the state says. And now the state is just let the horse get out of the barn on that.
Well, what it is, powerful people have gotten involved and had things withdrawn.
They don't want any regulations.
No, they don't want to be told what to do.
So that's a pretty important one there, I think.
You know, the other thing on that is enforcement on that's just terrible because the other thing they did was they kind of disabled DES by cutting enforcement budgets over the years.
Right.
The only way they could do it was by the fining system. And once the fining system was stopped, they had no money to hire people.
Well, state legislature also hobbled the enforcement by not allowing you to go on somebody's property to inspect to see if they're in compliance or not.
Right. I mean, the first one was initially a little bit based on something that.
Something that's a violation afterwards. Sorry, Tara, go ahead.
Well, the first one, I know you guys had Ken McWilliams there for a while, and he and I worked on the first shoreline ordinance. I think it was the first or one of the first in the state on Lake Sunapee. And the first state one was kind of modeled on that. But a few years later, it was just totally rewritten to make the vegetated buffer part kind of meaningless.
Right.
The point system where one big tree meets the requirement is just not, it might as well not be there.
Yeah, I remember the false logic that Jeb Bradley used, saying that one big tree was worth more than all the shrubbery and stuff.
Yeah,
And it was like,
that's
that's
the
not true.
way
I
around.
know.
Like projecting, never mind. Um,
Yeah.
So anyway, I think that we gotta, I'm not sure that it was in this, I can't remember now, whether we actually talked about considering whether the town ought to be more aggressive on this.
Well,
Yes, I have 100-foot vegetative buffer in the action plan.
On
Yeah,
that point, I think, Tara, the thing that I noticed was that in the questionnaire, there were a lot of people who were talking about protecting the water supplies. And that's, I think, where that could be mentioned along with the buffer so that they associate the two together.
That's a
Oh,
good idea.
Well, the water,
No.
all of our water supply is groundwater.
Yeah,
I mean, it's not just drinking water. It's the water that goes into still, there are a lot of people that use the lake water.
Yeah, but no, everybody's got drilled wells for the most part, and the town's on an aquifer down here. But what you're talking about is managing runoff water quality
Yeah,
into the streams. And we did cover that with the stormwater stuff. And we're talking about potentially creating a stronger overlay district. So,
I think that, you know, the concept of protecting water supplies, whether it's the small tertiary streams or whichever that flow into the bigger streams, those affect a lot of water supplies for people.
not really, because unless they're drawing right out of surface water.
I have several on my property that bubble right up. The springs.
Right, but surface water is usually, once it becomes surface water, is surface water, but in really dry periods, yes, I suppose it can go back down in.
it's more wetlands that are connected. I mean, it's more gonna be wetlands that are connected because they're kind of recharge and discharge spots.
They're big sponges, they'll go either way, but.
Right.
Do we need to say anything about the going forward part of the plan versus where things have been grandfathered? And I think there's a lot of potential problem with existing structures and things that were built before regulations that came into being. And I don't know how you,
Would you, I mean, like in the areas developed in the 50s and 60s,
yeah.
we may at some point have to go back and redesign systems.
That's something.
And we
that-
mentioned-
That probably goes in the infrastructure section.
I mean, because everyone was using 55-gallon drums.
Right, but we have we talk about looking at the dense development, whether it needs to be sewered or not.
Yeah, and we'll talk about that for stormwater too.
Yeah, stormwater. One of the things I mentioned in the notes to Tara today were that Wolfboro has engaged the highway department into a pretty robust stormwater management plan for everything that flows into the bay and into Lake Wentworth. And so they've got rain gardens going and they got plans, they're actually putting money into it. So we've done a little bit with porous pavement in the bay, but unless we vacuum that pavement every year after the winter, it's gonna just not work at all, so. But the buffer, this buffers around surface waters is what we're kind of ending up with. And for protecting groundwater, it's more about having proper control of subsurface disposal. And so those two have been worked on in here. I think we got those covered, but and we do talk about, as we're going along, the way this is written, it talks about this can reduce impacts from a variety of pollutants, including, and so she is explaining as we're going along that there's a potential for this problem. Here's some things that you can do, and they're mentioned in here. at the end, when you do the action plan, you pull out certain things and you say, we need to consider these things.
And I think that's where we, as a group, kind of get ahead of ourselves, is we want to put everything in everywhere.
Yeah.
But we have to take it section by section and then do our follow-up and
Right.
just be consistent with that.
The one thing that sticks in my craw was from Attorney Sessler, that this, along with the vision and the zoning, are the total defense of the town.
Right.
So that in the writing of this, sometimes you have to explain something that will provide and allow you to do something. If we want to create some different type of subdivision or something like that, we need to be able to provide that and make a possibility allowing for that in the description. So if it's not in the master plan, we can't do it. So.
Well, that's-
I think
That's not entirely, I mean, I wouldn't say it that way. If it's like, the master plan has no regulatory effect. But if you are gonna implement the recommendations, you want the argument for it in the narrative. And that's why for something like the buffers, I like to include a little bit of the science of it, and we want to have references and that kind of thing. But there's no kind of master plan police that are gonna come along and say, well, you're
No,
doing this additional thing and it's not in your plan, but it's really helpful for things like grant money, though, if it is in your plan.
And I think to Russ's point, he made a very good point and it was pretty spot on. So we outline it here and then we follow up, we mention it, but then we follow up with on that action plan. And then those two work together
excellent.
with our zoning and anything else.
Yeah, and we'll get to we'll definitely look at that other piece. That's the next thing on the
Okay.
agenda. So. And then, so the impervious cover, this is basically all the subdivisions and driveways and pretty neat, actually. But it shows, for example, if you look at where Irwin Marine is in the bay and across the street where they park their boats, that's a big pink parking lot. And all along the bay itself, you can see those parking lots. And then the rest of them are basically subdivision roads. You can see how they, or they were just roads off of, driveways off of roads, like Rand Hill Road. You can see every house on there. And you can see
That's
up,
pretty neat.
up the other side, up Alton Mountain Road. Then there's another one that really sticks out is, yeah, and then you get into downtown and you can see where the school is,
Mm.
where Alton Central School is.
But you know what I see that I didn't put on there is what the data source was for the impervious. I have to rerun this map.
Also, what is the basis for the map? Because my question comes from Meadow Dam Pond. There was a huge flood, I forget exactly which year it was, and the dam broke. And the state did not allow them to build it back, so I don't think Meadow Dam Pond is there.
It is, still is.
Not that size, is it?
Yeah, no,
They
look it on Google Earth. It's there.
Did they rebuild it?
No, the pond was a lot bigger than that when the dam broke. You can see it, honestly, just take a look at it. It's-
So I use Granite and the free, Granite Viewer tool on there because I'd have to charge everybody a lot more if I bought the Esri products to make my own map. So I'm kind of limited in what can be on. I can't edit the base layers at all. I can pick which ones I use, but I can't edit them, and I can't edit the legend other than to go in Adobe and take some words out. But
So this is 2010 data, right?
well, the pink is, but the base map is current.
Current, okay. So that's what it is. But if you look at Google Earth, it
I will,
looks
I
just
will.
like that.
The only time I ever saw it was right after the flood, and it was just a tiny little area.
Oh.
And at the time, they applied to rebuild the dam and the wetlands board said no.
Honestly, I would love to see this map now with the 12-year difference. I wonder what that pink looks like now.
Yeah, there wasn't any newer data for that.
Sure there wasn't, that would be very interesting.
I think that, again, this doesn't have to be encyclopedic. I think it
Oh,
has.
no, I was
it
just
has to
saying, for
be-
instance,
it's trying
I'm
to
curious.
show you what it
Yep.
sort of looks like, it's instructive because what you're trying to get at is fundamentally, there hasn't been a huge change since then. There's been a few more subdivisions here and
Right.
there, but nothing like where it really counts all along the bay,
No,
Yeah,
And-
I'm just you'll have the nice big detailed maps as a reference that you'll have from your NRI and these, as you said, Russ, are just really to illustrate some points rather than be detailed maps.
So, yeah, and the ones that we have from the Natural Resources Inventory are, I don't know if you saw them, but we have them downstairs.
no.
And they see this cuts off, it doesn't even cover part of the town. This is just a sort of a
Yeah.
zoom in, so.
No, it's good for what it is. It was a generalization. I wonder what that pink looks like now.
Yeah, to my knowledge, there's probably like, I can spot a few maybe up off of, well, I guess go far enough, I guess. Actually, it's got quite a bit of it.
I was just zoomed in on that area because I was trying to make the point of, there's an awful lot of surface water flowing into the lake.
Yeah. And when I talked about surface water, we actually talked about every single major brook that's in town.
I did see that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And all of those, from the Conservation Commission's point of view, we're trying to get protections around those. So if there's an opportunity to get some conservation land, like around Frohawk Brook, for example, you want to do that.
So when I read this today,
Yeah.
because I wanted it to be fresh, it's so interesting. And if anybody even just had the slightest, like there was so much information about just the land right in this one compact area.
Hmm.
It was just really fantastic.
Hmm.
It listed all the brooks, all the water in town, basically, that most people wouldn't even realize. They could maybe name half.
Yeah.
So not that they would, but I was like, I want to set all my guys down and say, hey, read this chapter.
And this spring, if you'd like to go out and go fishing, we'll show you where.
My guys are big fishermen,
Come on.
so sign me up.
I mean, and then we brought in, so stormwater management plan. How about that? Talked about that there's, and Tara brought in some stuff on
So on
climate
3.6,
change. We're having,
we're on 3.6, Tom.
Yeah.
Maybe when we change pages, could we just,
sorry, yeah, I'm sorry.
that's okay.
Yeah, that we are on page 3.6. So I think the important part is that we've had floods in the past, but now we're having more frequent events and more
100-year storms are happening every 10.
intense events.
I remember when we used to get snow,
Over 300-year storms in a year.
remember when we used to get snow during the winter? Now we get ice.
So I don't know if, I'm happy with all that, but
I don't know if it belongs in the infrastructure section or not, but one of the action items that I think you and I talked about before was recommending that there be a study, or at least in the village in the Bay Area, about waste, and I'd like to include stormwater as part of
yeah,
that.
we have that as a,
That is
in the
part of the
action, action
So,
item.
Bob, I think that's so important, Bob, that we should touch on it in a few chapters so that they kind of tie together, natural resources, land use and infrastructure.
Yeah, it's probably necessary
Yeah, and I agree, Tara, because
to-
that is important. It should be mentioned.
to
Sprinkle that
capture
everywhere.
some of the more, the bay and probably downtown and get it out of the aquifer, and have it disposed of. One of the disposal areas, it could be doing it like Wolfboro, for example. It could be up behind Turtle Crawl Park up in that land up in this, over towards, sort of towards the high school, but you have to stay out of the wetlands and stuff. But you got to get it into soils that are moderately permeable and have a lot of space to do it. And that kind of Wolfboro did that with, and they look at what they've been able to do with their town. They've been able to get a lot built over there. So,
On a lower scale, when they redid Rhines Road, where I live, they put in catch basins and ran that down the hill. And at the bottom of the hill, it crosses the road from the right side going down to the left side, and that dumps into my property, which then goes to a seasonal stream. That's stormwater.
and it could be okay if it's settled out enough.
Well, I think that approach is taken in a lot of part of the town. I'm not sure that it's ever been documented as being something you want to do or it just gets done. I don't know,
Well,
it's a
again,
surprise to me that they dump the water into my property.
Is that what Gene Young was speaking of down in that area? Is that the same area? I know he talked about it wasn't, it wasn't a culvert, but it was like a catch basin.
Yeah, there's a series of catch basins running right down the hill on the either side of the road. And then all that water gets collected at the bottom and it just drains into my property.
But
And there's a seasonal stream.
Had it always drained there, or did they change it?
What's that?
Had it always drained there?
I don't know.
Probably did. Well,
Because-
Probably did, but not quite as apparent.
I had a problem on my driveway because the town put in a couple of runoffs that they never got permission for, that overran the culverts that I had. And so I had to go to the Conservation Commission and get them to go to the selectmen because I had put all my land in conservation easement. And I no longer could say, you go ahead and do it. Conservation Commission has the control. But ultimately what happened was the selectmen said they would allow the crew to, if I paid for the culvert, the crew would install it because the one that had been there was adequate before, no longer was adequate. So in other words, they have to give you you have to give them an easement to run water onto their property if it's never been there before.
Right. But
That I don't know, but the reason I'm raising the issue isn't from my particular situation. But if that's a technique that's been used in general throughout the town, then that's something that should be considered.
They're using
Because
gravity. as much as
eventually that
possible.
water drains into Lake Winnipesaukee.
Okay,
Oh, yeah.
let's see if I-
so,
where are we? Chapter 3 still.
Yeah, well,
So
still-
what I did do is I just pulled up the action plan. So, because we're kind of spilling over into the action plan. So why don't we keep that for that?
Good connections, though.
Yeah. And then floodplains. One of the things about the floodplain is there's 2 dams, I think. One's in New Durham and the Wentworth Dam down here that have a potential of causing big problems if they were to fail. So anyway, there's information we got to get from Ryan Heath from the emergency.
Yeah, and I think they're actually updating that.
Right.
Fish and Game has this one here, the
Right.
Wentworth.
But
It's-
I don't know if it's
It's under
called,
lease, but it's never been used.
but I don't know if it's called a high hazard dam or not. It's a very classification.
Yeah, I mean, the DES has those ratings. They assign those ratings, and it's important to know that those ratings are based on the value of property downstream of the dam, not the condition of the dam. So we want to be a little bit careful about talking about a dam being high hazard in the plan.
Right.
Because
but I-
it makes people
have to
think it's way to
explain-
go, and it just means there's expensive houses downstream of it. But I think we want to talk about, and that was one of the things I moved, Russ, that I think we want to talk about dams and infrastructure, because here, we're talking about the floodplain as a natural resource, somewhere that catches the stormwater and lets it settle in and slow down.
So one of the things we said was the biggest floodplain we have is the Mary Meeting River. And then we have other fairly substantial ones, but they're relatively contained to the larger brooks that we have.
Except one of those floodplains happens to be where the main fire station and Public Works Department is located.
Yeah, right on top of one of the town wells.
Well, that's part of the Mary Meeting that I was talking.
Is that the Mary
Yeah,
Meeting?
yeah.
But again, we're talking about the floodplain as a natural resource in this chapter. And one thing, I don't know if you noticed something I didn't recommend. I usually recommend a no net loss floodplain ordinance, but I didn't in your case because some of the other things that you had talked about, Russ, that I included would cover most of the floodplain. Like if you did more of a vegetated buffer along shorelines and some wetland protection, you've protected most of your floodplain. So in your case, I didn't recommend that as an additional overlay.
Should we consider not just wetlands, but also, so a wetlands and watershed protection district, which I have familiarity with, is 100 feet back from something that is mapped as wetlands. And then there is the floodplain that's beyond that. And then you get to the edge of the floodplain and you come to the bank where there's a change in elevation. And so in high water, the floodplain will work, but it floods over the wetlands and up onto the actual dry part of what would be a dry part of the floodplain that is only used during a big storm event. And then it recedes from there. So we were in the town I was in, Wyndham, we were trying to keep people out of the actual floodplain itself.
Yeah, and you could, you can certainly consider that. I was just saying that, it seemed like we were recommending some pretty drastic zoning changes already. And I was trying to think, well, you'd cover most of that with some wetland protection and 100-foot buffer.
Right.
I personally think you'd have a hard time finding the science to support 100-foot buffer around wetlands.
Around wetlands themselves?
Yeah, I didn't put that in the action plan. I think you have something in there now that could be a little stronger. I think the key thing is if you could get 100-foot vegetated buffer from the streams that aren't developed yet, and have people think more in those terms around the lakes and ponds,
You'd still be in the wetland with 100 feet from the thread of the stream.
Well, I think you want to, we'll get into that more, but I think that, what I do a lot is include wetlands of a certain size. I don't remember if you have this already or not. Wetlands of a certain size, but of any size if they're adjacent to the stream, because
Right.
those have a higher value.
They're associated with the stream, they're overflow areas, right?
Yeah, right.
But so there was a little confusing to me where you were going with that, whether it was going to be 100 feet or 25 feet from the edge of any wetland.
From the,
Right now, we have a 25-foot setback for any wetlands over 10,000 square feet.
Because we never thought we could get any more.
Right.
Wolfboro and a lot of other towns have 50, 75 plus.
so you've got 25 now, and we'll talk about this more when we get to the action plan, but what I recommended was getting rid of the loopholes to that. It seemed like you have it, but you don't have it. You have it unless somebody gets a wetland permit from DES.
Right.
which Then they just have a permit to fill, and why did you bother protecting a buffer around it? It seemed like that would be a more effective way to go, and maybe easier for people if you didn't change that 25 feet, but just get rid of the loopholes to it. and add in wetlands of any size that are contiguous with a stream.
That would be a little different than the 10,000 square foot, yeah. The other thing that you have to allow people to do is to get across a stream or a wetland to land that is developable on the other side. And you,
Yes. Yeah, so I wrote the wetlands model that DES publishes. And not in a closet, but with, a team of other planners and DES and municipal lawyers. And we have a long list of exceptions in there because that's really important to making these ordinances bulletproof. If you just say, oh, you can't do the thing, you're much more likely to lose in court. But if you have a list of these are the things you can do, these are the things you can't, these are the things you might be able to do if you give us a plan showing how it's gonna protect the wetland. So that's the kind of thing I would want to see you do.
well,
And I've updated that for several towns and had some good municipal attorneys look at it more recently. So it's in pretty good shape.
Let me ask a question that might be a non sequitur or not, but I have a seasonal stream that bisects my property. Now, do I have to be so far away from that in order to?
it depends on whether it's wetland soils or not. Whether it is identified as a wetland or not, even though it may be seasonal, okay? You may have a wetland soil and wetland plants.
Okay, I didn't see that.
Or it could be a runoff canal, like,
But the definite, you have to go, what is the definition of a wetland? It's the Army Corps of Engineers wetlands definition, so that
But is Bob asking about the shoreline setback or the wetlands?
well, no, he's saying he has a seasonal stream.
I heard him, but Bob, were you asking about the shoreline setback or the wetland?
I don't know what a seasonal stream gets classified as.
Because
That's
right
like
now, we're not recommending, the draft that Russ and I put in front of you isn't recommending a setback from a seasonal stream. It would add more protection to the lake, certainly, but it would be a lot tougher for people to understand.
Well, I think that we ought to stick with myself, I think you ought to stick with the wetland definition. If there happens to be a seasonal stream in the middle of the wetland, that's possible.
The wetlands, yeah, but I was saying for the shoreline buffer. I was recommending that just be year round.
What do you mean, the shoreline of a lake or pond?
Or stream.
Or of a stream that flows, a perennial stream?
Yes.
Yeah, well, that would have the same setback as a wetland would. If you have a perennial stream, it runs through and it goes on to dry land up on either side, then you'd have your setback from the stream bank, from the high water mark.
Correct.
Okay.
But if, like in Bob's case, he's talking about, I have a seasonal stream.
Yes.
And it may only flow in the wintertime or,
It's spring.
in springtime.
Yeah.
And then, but you want to see how the rule would apply to that if we got to get rid of this 10,000 square foot thing, okay? Would be that you do the soils mapping. And if it's wetland soils, then you measure 25 feet out from the edge of the wetland soils, and that's your protected zone around that seasonal stream.
Just to be clear, though, I'm not recommending you get away from the 10,000 square feet. Unless it's a contiguous with a year-round stream.
Right, so one of the things you have to do is where is headwaters? That's another tricky one. So in other words, you get up to, where do you draw the line where the stream doesn't count anymore?
Well, I think your starting point is the database that DES has. I mean, they've done a lot of mapping and that's the official surface water map for the state. And then if a land, you'd write into your ordinance a path for a landowner to show you it's wrong. So, just with any other mapping, it's, the assumption is that it's right and the landowner can show you it's wrong.
But the way we usually get into it is because somebody's trying to do a subdivision or a development.
Mhm.
And they have to have wetlands mapped.
Yeah.
And then the ordinance applies to that.
And they don't want to map it because they could get another lot in.
And that's where you need to be able to have your town engineer that has the capability of maybe they have a wetland soil scientist on the staff.
And the other key that we found was you actually have to plot and map the wetland. You can't estimate the wetland.
Oh, no, it has to have flagging. There should have been flags in the field and
And
they should be surveyed, right? Yeah,
But
that-
again, the maps that we start with are your clue that you should be looking for them to have a certified wetland scientist map it.
Right. And generally, when the Conservation Commission sees these things, we know where the wetlands are anyway, so. And we have the ability to go out and look at something and do it. I remember fighting with an engineer about where a flag was going to be placed. About 20 feet difference, and made difference of 2 more lots that they were going to sell for $100,000. So anyway, I think it's the way, what we got to do here, Tara, is we have to write it in such a way that we need to strengthen the wetlands rules that we have.
Yes.
And don't try to prescribe it in this document, but simply say there's a need to do that because the way it's written right now, it has weaknesses in it.
Okay.
Well, let's get to the action plan. I'll do the land use the same way. I'm trying to identify the weaknesses in not just weaknesses, but disconnects between what you have in your town's land use regulations and what I heard people say they wanted in
Yeah.
things like the survey. And then in the action plan, let's dig into that language and make sure you're comfortable with how strong or not strong it is.
Right. And so we have this, so Tara pulled out an example. It's the same, it's not the whole town, but it's a lot of the
Now,
town.
this one is the whole town.
Does it go all the way down? No, it doesn't. I don't think it goes. Oh, yeah.
It goes down to Farmington.
Yeah. Rest-
It labeled Farmington on that little tip of the town, but it's trying to be the whole
No,
town.
you're right. Sorry. But the biggest system by far is the Coffin Brook Merry Meeting system.
Hmm.
By far. And then some other ones that are important don't go into Lake Winnipesaukee. They go into the Merrimack River down the Suncook River at Hills Pond and Sunset Lake. There's a Frohock Brook is in there, and then all the drainage off of straight back up and back there. That's good. It gives you an example of where it is. We have a lot of little isolated wetlands, which is important. You want to mention that about amphibians? Try to work that in there somewhere,
Sure.
because it's pretty obvious that we have a lot of little isolated pockets that, some of them are vernal pools, some of them are, a lot of them are vernal pools, actually.
I'll tell you, come spring, those peepers are loud.
I don't think I've ever heard frogs as loud as you hear down by Smoky Hollow there by Bar Farm. Where the strawberry picking was.
Come to my house.
Well, yeah, you're right next to no, it's very loud though down there at night. Anyway. So the overlay district and everything else, I probably need to look at that a little more. We may disagree on this, Tara, because I come from, we installed 100-foot wetland and watershed protection district over from any wetland that was connected to it, that wasn't isolated, in 1978 in Wyndham, New Hampshire,
Wow.
the absolute southern part of the state. And it got passed and it was put in, and the town grew from 3,000 people to 18,000 people over that time. So it can be done. It hasn't been done. I almost got run out of town, but somebody, you know, Jackson Polinsky?
As an aside, I
Yeah,
was
he was,
on,
I gave him fits.
I was on 11A up to Guilford, up to the Gunstock area today.
Yeah.
And there's a survey crew out on the upper bridge above the one that they were working on. So that's coming.
So I'm sorry. You guys kind of went sidebar on your 100-foot buffer, 10,000 square foot.
Yeah.
So now we're here and
pretty
I see
it
the
is-
10,000 square foot, but 25-foot buffer zone. So, and I see that this is where you're going to have a difference of opinion
I think
is
so.
right here. Okay.
It's really,
Well, because this is what you have now, but you have a bunch of exceptions to it. And I was trying to think of, you know, I'd rather see you have a plan that you'll implement rather than one that's more idealistic and doesn't happen, right? So that's my
What's
thinking.
your- yeah.
and
We opted for the 10,000 feet as a lot of people were saying, oh, well, it's just a tiny little wetland. It doesn't really matter.
Mm.
So we came up with the definition of a wetland that was 10,000 square feet that adjoins somebody's property. You gotta have a setback from that. 'Cause
Okay.
It's adequately large that it's influential.
But here's the thing. You guys have basically no shoreline protection.
Right.
There's none. And so, you know, if you're trying to pick, you want to pick a couple of things that you're gonna give the most water quality protection for, you know, the most bang for your buck kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
Then I'd rather see you go for, you know, protect the vegetated buffer against the streams than around wetlands, because there's, you know, the buffer around a wetland is more for the protection of wildlife than anything, unless it is floodplain.
And
Well,
I'm
what-
just a layperson, but in my mind, I would think, in my mind, a wetland is a wetland and you basically already have, like, you know, you have to kind of stay away from it and you have so it has that natural buffer there. I think the streams, because they do
Move.
yeah. So I would think that those would be more
One of the
important.
keys is the no cut buffer. Because what some city people want to do is they want to mow right up next to it. So it
Right.
looks nice, but it's that vegetation that gives you the filtration that's critical.
well, there's
Yeah,
that.
but neither Russ or I are talking about a setback. We're talking about a vegetated buffer.
Yeah, and a vegetated buffer, the truth is that people violate that stuff all the time.
Mhm.
And if you didn't have a buffer, they go into the wetland
Mm.
itself. So it's really more of a trying to create a mistake-proof
Mhm.
Yep.
area.
Right.
So,
But I'd rather see you get the loopholes out of that and get a positive vote at town meeting than try to make the 25 feet bigger and lose.
I think we need to write it in such a way that we need to look at it so that it's more effective. And we can suggest some things, but it doesn't mean you couldn't go further. If you can make your case. And it's tough. It was tough.
Well, and also if we can just improve on what we have, I mean, it's not like we have to go from 0 to 60, boom.
Yeah.
So,
Well, let's talk about that when we get to the action plan anyway.
yeah. So we'll move on to groundwater.
Yeah, onto groundwater, and this will have some technical information in it, like the transmissivity, what transmissivity is, and what a stratified drift aquifer is,
Mhm.
fractured bedrock.
Basically, the fractured
Just-
bedrock in the south of the state holds very little water, Whereas with the stratified gravels, there's a much bigger volume of water being held.
Of course. If you put a bunch of rocks in a glass,
Yeah.
you know, I mean,
Well, basically what it is in the south, it's granite with a few cracks, and that's all, it's what's hiding in the cracks.
Yeah.
Is what they've got.
yeah,
But in any case, so but most of the people in town get their water from bedrock wells.
yes.
And so and then we have, so you have the big sand and gravel, saturated sand and gravel deposits all on the Merrimack River. That's like really good aquifer. That's been known for a long time. But there are other ones that are a little more limited. They don't have as thicknesses of sand and gravel, and that's all these other major brooks that we have in town, but they're important as well. Because what happens with them is they become reservoirs to feed the bedrock wells that are adjacent to them. We get groundwater recharge that can actually get down into the bedrock, so we want to protect those.
Of course.
And we do have, so we talked about the aquifer, and she shows them here.
And I put that on the next page because I think it's important for people to think about that the water in your town wells is not just in your town's control, but there's maybe some cooperation needed with the neighboring town.
Yeah, I mean,
See, I didn't say it in the narrative, but I just kind of left it to be figured out by looking at the map, I guess.
so that brownish area, the darker mustard color area, that sort of snakes down through the middle of the Merrimack River, that's the esker, the major esker system that is very porous. And that's what the town wells are in. And they're fed by the more silty stuff, which is the light yellow that goes in, but the real water comes from
The darker.
the darker esker system.
There's some nice eskers in the Trask Swamp. I used to take a lot of Boston people in there for the different universities.
But so this, there's pieces of them. If you've ever canoed on the Merrimack River out there, those long skinny islands that run down through the middle
Mhm.
are sand and gravel ridges.
Mhm.
Anyway, but that's where the water comes from for the town, as Tara points out. And I see the biggest threat to it all is that we're discharging a lot of stuff in the village here, right into this aquifer, which we pull for drinking water from over here.
Right. And that's,
It's an accident waiting to happen.
yeah, I agree.
So there's a town dumps. Turns out, Tara, there was a town dump behind the highway garage
Yep.
years ago in the 1950s. It ran from like early 1900s to like 1959.
I didn't even know that until like earlier this year.
And
And
it was right near the Merry Meeting, really right near.
Well, yeah,
basically in it.
I was gonna say that had to be basically in it because it's right there.
And then the other one there was one out off of Coffin Brook Road. And then I think that might have been supplanted by the one where we actually had the landfill, where the
Yeah.
current transfer station is now. And that obviously got contaminated. We pay out money every year to try to fix that problem.
Mm.
So could you send me a couple sentences? You would put a note in there, but that's your note, I think, about.
Yeah, I just found out a little bit more about it. Who the hell told me?
I think they should be mentioned. I don't think they should be forgotten.
Yeah,
Yeah, so just email me a couple sentences, Russ, to pop
Yeah.
in there.
it's, I think Virgil told me that. He knows everything.
Yeah, he does.
So we'll do that. I'll do that.
Because what it was the one on Coffin Brook was subdivided, and we made sure at the time that it was really well tested before the lots got settled.
Now, depends on what went in it years ago.
Oh, it's horrid. So obviously we dig, but my husband's like A++ personality. So anything that we have in whatever we do, it's always flat. We're always digging up. We're always making it better. So we have a yard, we put our buffer around it, wood chip buffer, whatever. But the things you pull out that they used to just bury, so whoever owned the property before just used their backyard
Yeah.
Oh,
as a
yeah.
landfill.
We always did that.
Oh my gosh.
Well, and in the colonial period, you find the houses built right around 1800. The nearest stone wall to the house, you dumped it over the stone wall.
Yeah.
You dumped it
crazy,
on the other guy's property.
Crazy.
Well, it could be your
Yeah.
property too, but it was on the other side of the wall.
Right.
But I mean, that's where people go bottle digging.
So a
Right.
lot of towns in New Hampshire share a dump with the neighboring town so that they can put it right on the boundary, like Hopkinton and Webster have the dump right there.
Mm.
Anyway. I think we're okay with that. I will just give you some more information about the dumps so that we make sure we talk about them. And they gotta be shown on that map. I don't think that was picked up in the natural resources inventory.
I didn't give you a map of potential contamination. so-
I don't think you have to, just refer to it in the back. That's all right.
Yeah.
So then we can talk about the wildlife action plan and Fish and Game.
My question is, how do you encourage landowners to keep a corridor open?
I think the only way you would be, honestly, I think would be like some tax break or something because people are not inclined.
No,
And like even to Russ's point earlier, you go right up, everybody wants to go right up to their line, like
no,
they just,
I mean, I think that you almost have to be able to, in a case like that, swap an extra lot for keeping an open corridor or something, there has to be some sort of bonus, otherwise it'll never get done.
Well, I think that, that's where you're missing a cluster ordinance, right?
Yep,
You don't have anything that allows cluster development, but when you do, or if you do, and that's that's the kind of thing that you can say, gee, we'd really rather see these lots away from this area.
and so the cluster ordinance is going back to the building. And could that circle back to the zoning
Right.
things that we're discussing in
usually-
other?
Usually the way you do it,
meetings?
we used to
Right.
call it an open space ordinance because cluster development
Mhm.
was not
bad
a
bad
good word.
vibes.
Right, okay.
But, so if somebody has like 100 acres,
Mhm.
you'd end up with, say, 25 to 30 acres with houses on it, and the rest would be conserved.
Mm.
And what you'd try to do is to conserve the part that had the most wildlife value to it. And the advantage to the developer is a lot less road costs, and your setback requirements are less, and everything is a little bit less.
Right, we're actually gonna.
The
working
difficulty
on
is,
next year.
that you don't have one plan for a cluster development. You can have cluster developments that are ranked 1 to 10, with 10 being really good and 1 being poor. And most people are striving for 3,
Well, the way we did it in Wyndham, then we go back to that, is if on that 100 acres, you'd say with the standard rules, the 2-acre minimum lot size or whatever it was at the time, how many houses would you get? And do that layout,
Hmm.
figure it out and put all the wetlands and everything else on it. Okay, that's the number of houses you can get. Now you're going to take those houses and reduce the lot sizes and group them over here.
Right,
But you still get the same number of houses, the same number of lots.
Hmm.
But you don't have to build as much roads.
Mhm.
And it
Makes
was,
sense.
and it was seen to,
Yeah,
it seemed to
makes-
sell to
makes
some
sense, yeah.
extent. I think we built
If
maybe,
explained,
yeah,
it's easy to understand, but just, it's something that would need to be explained and people
Right.
just need to understand it.
so maybe we can put that in there for wildlife corridors the getting them planned into subdivisions. Maybe it's in the subdivision
I'll
regs.
be talking about that in the land use chapter.
Yeah. The other thing that can be done, believe it or not, I think it does work, is if you share these maps with people. We have these same maps through the Lakes Region Conservation Plan that was put together by LRTC and the Forest Society and the Nature Conservancy.
They're great maps.
And you can find your house on this. So you can find your house lot. And you can see whether you're in a high value wildlife area,
Oh, cool.
you know, and some people that would put a light bulb on and say, you know, I can do something for this, you know.
I think some of those maps are in what I gave you,
In-
some of these maps.
In here?
Yep,
Okay.
I would maybe
I think so.
different from this meeting, but if you have that and you're able to, those maps are available online.
We have them in the conservation, if you go on the Conservation Commission web,
Right.
part of the town website, you'll find them right there. Conservation plan.
Okay. Could you share that with me? Could you email me that?
Yeah,
On a
yeah,
separate
yeah.
note?
So I think that is something that could be done as well. So maybe two things that pop out of this is education and opportunity for, as you call, cluster zoning, or it's not a zone, it's an option. It's something you can build.
Right, it would end up being an ordinance, a zoning ordinance.
But it wouldn't
Yep.
necessarily be limited to any particular part of town. You might want to consider that too.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, absolutely.
So when we're leaping ahead a little land use, but when I wrote the state's model for that, I actually didn't call it cluster. I call it lot size averaging because that's what the concept is, but nobody understands that. So I think your idea of calling it open space is better. But one of the things I was trying to encourage and get people away from thinking that it has to be a big development. It doesn't have to be a big development to benefit from that same concept,
Right.
right? If it's
I think
three
that's
lots,
very vital too, to realize that it doesn't have to be big.
right? And I think that helps people think about it like that. It, you know what? One of the things I always think about it, and you guys don't have a large lot rural district, so it's not as relevant for you. But for towns that have a 5 or 10 acre district, you know, and some farmer wants to subdivide a lot for their kid, they were having to hack off 5 or 10 acres of farmland, and that's just stupid. So the lot size averaging would let them do 1 acre, and then there's 9 or 4, whatever, that just never gets developed, right? That compensates for that. That's why it's in the technical term is lot size averaging, but that nobody knows what that means when it gets zoning ordinance like
It's
that.
not a
But-
fun word.
Right.
but that's the concept that Russ was talking about in terms of open space or conservation subdivision. But it does, you know, people, you know, we saw some survey comments, people saying we don't want cluster zoning, right? There was a handful of people that wrote that specifically as a comment, and I think they're picturing some, you know, a certain kind of development with a certain kind of house and a certain size, and we'll need to get across that that's not what we mean. We're just trying to give people, whether they want to cut off 1 lot or 5, just some flexibility so that they can build in a less expensive way and save more of the natural resource land.
And I think that's important. I think it's right on, like most people don't understand. So it is really important to educate. And if it can be explained easily, then we should do so, just to help people understand, like, because people won't go out of their way.
I think it needs to be flexible enough. The reason I said 100 acres, because that's what we were seeing in the 1980s.
Yes, yeah,
We were seeing 100 lot subdivisions
yeah.
with McMansions.
And that was the 80s. Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
And as an example, I mean, you don't want to give, it's an example, not 100 examples.
Right.
What's what renewable means.
Okay, so
It'll come to me later.
So then are we going to 312?
let's see. So, yeah, I think so. Let me
No, if
see.
you're harvesting wood.
So we're off of The wildlife, right?
That's
Yeah.
the concept.
And then the wildlife habitat we have in pink.
I'm hearing Tom too, so we need,
Okay, I think we're gonna go to, can we
wildlife.
go to, all right, you had a couple of things here, add stream crossing info.
yeah, I can do that now. I know who.
You found it,
meant
right?
Yeah,
Yeah, okay.
so I'm gonna do that.
And scenic resources, we just got the mapping from the natural resource inventory. We've got, we actually have pictures and photographs. I got a bunch of stuff that I need to look at.
Great.
And I'll sift through it and get that to you.
Apparently,
If I sent you photos, Tara, in a PowerPoint with the description in the PowerPoint of what that photo is, then you could just take it out of the PowerPoint and use it. I was trying to think of a way to label it. It's harder for me to take a JPEG and dump it into a Word document and then try to write what it is underneath it. I'd just soon make a PowerPoint and send it to you, and then you can.
Can you send me the JPEGs and then a separate file that says the one called this is that, right?
Okay, yeah, I'll do that.
Just like an index to them.
Yeah, I
That
just
way-
figured I could get you one document, it would have the whole thing. Poof.
Yeah, but we might lose resolution or yeah. It'll
Yeah.
add a step on my end, so, good.
Whatever it works for you.
we do have several overlooks that are scenic overlooks that were created. I know that, and that was Juliet Peverly getting those. And the problem was they never got permission to trim on the property. So that the overlooks as you drive on Route 11 North, can't trim those trees because they belong to the property below.
Yeah,
Well, the town did do some work, but it's not.
It's conceivable we could talk to some of the landowners, but.
Okay,
But I think that what this does is it simply shows what we have that is out there. And as far as maps and photos, we'll have that. Oh, you talked about a ridgeline ordinance. We have the steep slopes, anything over 25%.
Well, we started a ridge line when Ken was here. And it never came about. And one of the problems was that people wanted to do so much clear cutting. So that there are places you can go and you can just see these eyesores when you're looking at them. Yes, they have a nice view, but looking back, it's not very attractive at all because it's just,
when you come down Alton Mountain and you look across and you're at the view
yeah.
on Alton Mountain Road and you look across that clear cut down on, probably on Bowman, I guess, maybe, or whatever it was. When that first happened, it was just like this.
Raw.
Yeah. Bad.
Well, I mean, the thing is that from years ago going on out on the mount, and there were these wonderful green places, they called them summer camps. They're gone. And all you see today are houses everywhere.
So anyway, I think that the only thing I need to do is, does anybody have any other comments about what she's got for scenic resources? Because I'm just going to provide her with some photos and
Nope.
resources for it.
Right, and that, so the question is that still available, the CD? And I think that's what that is.
I think that's what it is, and we have,
Yeah.
I can supplement it with some newer stuff.
Mhm.
And I have some,
This is a good starting point.
there's some good stuff, because I had done some presentations about the Belknap, so I got some stuff.
Nice.
Do you
yeah,
want,
and those maps would be too detailed to put in here. I just was asking whether you still had it, and it'd be good to include a couple of the photos in here, though. We need more photos. So you already tried this ridgeline ordinance and it didn't go anywhere. What are your thoughts on it right now?
we started it and actually had on a couple of subdivisions, we got them to agree to it. And then all of a sudden the land was transferred from one person to the next. and they didn't agree to it and they just cut everything, you know, so. There was no enforcement.
One of
You
the,
haven't really talked about getting it into the zoning.
one of the objectives of some of our conservation work is to preserve those ridgelines. A lot of it falls within the target areas. for
Well, if you can
conserved
come up with
land.
some ideas, we'll greatly support it.
Well, there's going to be 500 acres of ridgeline that's going to get protected this spring, so.
And so the last question I had in there, Jessica, you must know the answer. We've come to the conclusion there are no local scenic roads designated. Is that right?
Not local designation, no. There's, what we found was that Lakes Region Tour Road that basically is Route 11.
Yeah, no, I have that in here. My question was whether you had any town designated scenic roads. Sounds like you don't.
No,
Do you want anything on spellings or errors?
Yeah, but email me so we don't bore everybody with that.
Okay.
Then I didn't have, the big thing about forest and agricultural lands is that most of it is forest. And there's a lot of agricultural lands that are mapped as good agricultural soils, but they're grown up now.
Yeah, they're all forested.
They've turned into pine and yellow,
Birch.
gray birch and juniper and stuff.
Yeah, that's why I changed the heading on this. I think you had it as soils and I changed it to land so that we're talking about
That makes more sense, yeah,
the
because,
lands that are actually farmed as well, not just the soil. So.
and we do have our farmlands, the biggest farmlands are blueberry barrens. And there is limited hay fields, pretty much. Most of them are just kept open for the purposes of keeping them open. There's not a lot of farming.
But if you don't have them, you really miss the fields, because the fields and a few cows in it is an optical delight.
Mm.
But when it all grows in and it's, you know, trashy looking woods, it's not very attractive.
That's my land was conserved before I bought it and I can't find anybody to farm it because it's too wet. And it was clear that it was the neighborhood wanting the view.
Yeah, I've looked at your house on Google Earth. It looks like you're down in the floodplain or something there.
Not, well, my field is, my house isn't.
Oh, no, the house isn't. No,
We
right.
had a couple of wet fields that were farmed by horse.
You know, if we could get a rice industry going, we'd be good.
So
You need the warmth.
the big thing about the section on conservation land is I tried to make the point that in the Forest Society's recommendation, the Hampshire Everlasting and Unfallen, or whatever it was, that each town ought to try to hit a 25% conserved land goal. And we're at about 10 or 12% right now. We have a little over 5,000 acres. So it would be meaning to add another 5,000 acres. The Alton Bay Realty Trust property on Mount Major is over 2,000 acres. If that project were to go through, that would put us a long ways towards doing that. So
I like Tara's idea of taking the penalty tax and applying it. We asked for 50% years and years ago because we wanted to get something. And
And that was my question. That was the only question I had was about that tax, so.
yeah, it was 2008, I think, that was voted in.
yeah, and at the time, Jim Washburn,
Well, Alan Sherwood put it together.
no, actually Jim Washburn too.
Yeah, but yeah, anyway, I mean, I think Alan was the chair of the Conservation Commission when that was on the
Chair of the
warrant.
planning board.
Kelly, did you want a sentence saying what that is? I left that out, didn't I?
No, I just was, so it said the land use tax.
Yeah.
Is currently 50%, and then the other 50% goes to general fund, the general fund, like,
The Conservation Commission gets the first $20,000
mhm,
and then up to 50%. And then 50% of what's left after that. That's
go,
what goes.
okay,
And that the conservation fund is solely at the discretion of the Conservation Commission to expend, not the selectmen tried to pull a power plant. And
Right.
fortunately, the RSA is defending.
okay, so
But the
then,
idea is that's used to purchase and pay for different things as the Conservation Commission can possibly get some certain
yes, no, and I
lands.
think that was done correctly. So, but it says, so the general fund, what is the general fund, like the
General
town?
fund is where any money that comes into the town
That's what I
goes into
thought,
the general fund.
yeah, that's what I thought, so.
You can buy fire trucks with it or something.
Well, and that's what I thought, but I just want to make sure that my thinking was correct. So I just wanted clarification on that because, yeah, we do want that money to go to conservation. It's land use change. It's not for a fire truck.
Yeah,
So, I mean, that's basically the thing. You
we do
have,
need fire trucks though.
I'm all on board on that. I think I've made my case on that at many meetings already.
you have an active Conservation Commission right now. We have a plan, we have
Mhm.
targets and everything else. It just needs to have the resources available to make things happen when they become available. So,
Okay.
So would that be a good thing to write in as a warrant article?
you'll look in the action plan and it's in there.
Okay.
Okay.
We pick up on that.
So we'll get there. So I found this particular piece interesting, especially after reading about the migratory birds this year, the dark skies.
Yeah.
And I was a little bit like, wow, that's in our plan. And I think that's really important. And I was happy to see it. And you're pretty thorough. So,
It was, that was a Ken job.
So we do have, and it's mentioned here in the, our site plan review regulations, we talk about very specifically about how lighting should be on a commercial project.
Okay.
Or multifamily stuff. And Scott Williams is all over that.
oh, I'm sure.
So I think that's fine. That kind of wraps that up. I don't know if there's anything else. I'll go back and get you the things that are hard.
I don't know if we should have let you go first. I don't know how I'm going to follow up my chapter after this. So I thought you did a really good job. It was very thorough and I appreciate your work on it, Russ. Thank you.
And it's nice to have Tara around. She's one
Well,
of
that
the
goes
original
without saying. Thank you, Tara.
authors of this stuff. So do you want to go to the action plan? And I have some comments on this.
Or can we talk about the format of it while we're here, first meeting?
Okay, go ahead.
So this is just something I wanted to kind of try out. I was trying it out in another town too recently. That, instead of having a goal, repeating a goal from the beginning of the plan and then listing stuff under it that's implement that goal, kind of have the goals or values over in the right-hand columns here so that people can see that each of these recommendations furthers multiple goals.
Yeah, no, I think that's good.
And I'd have, obviously, when we write the action plan, have some kind of introduction to explain all that, right? But I think it adds somehow to, like, wow, if you do this, you're hitting all these goals from the tax base and clean water and whatnot.
Yeah. The other thing that this would be used for would be for a standing master plan committee
Mhm.
to monitor every year how we're doing.
Absolutely.
And I had thought about maybe saying, well, this one here should be, maybe it's a red, green, and yellow. But Tara argues against prioritizing things.
I'm gonna keep arguing against it for a couple of reasons. One is that I think you'll waste a lot of time thinking about that and overthinking it. And what happens if all the ducks are in a row next year to get grant money for something that you've put in your plan as a low priority.
That's a good point.
Yeah, it's kind of like what I think about prime wetlands. I think every wetland is important.
Yeah, there's that. So,
Just
yeah, I
appreciate
think
that you
we're
guys
gonna-
can agree to disagree politely. Thank you.
I just hate to see you put priorities or a time frame because that's not real life. That's just not how any master plan has ever been implemented. I'm gonna give you, when we're done, you'll have a chapter that's the action plan that has some introductory language to explain it, but you'll also have a spreadsheet. I actually build it in an Excel sheet and then you'll have that. So you can add columns, right? You'll be able to add columns as the master plan committee that oversees the implementation or is the cheerleader for the implementation. You'll be able to add columns for notes and what's been done and what
Right.
some grant potentials are and like that. So you'll be able to use it as a working tool and
That's good. That works. And I agree. This is just everything that could be done. It's not everything that should be done necessarily or will be done, but they're recommendations, policies and recommendations.
Okay.
And if you can get 60% of them done, you'd be doing pretty good. So anyway, the surface and the first one is all about, and that hits every single master plan goal, which is to talk about, do you need to have, you need to protect your water supply and you need to be able to handle your wastewater properly.
And I would say that pretty much this is already prioritized
Yeah,
by the X's next to each thing,
Right.
just without actually telling everybody it's prioritized, right?
yeah,
You
that's
can
good.
quickly glance at it and see, well,
Point,
if it
yeah.
marks, if it ticks off all the boxes, clearly that's a priority, right?
Yeah.
good point, yeah.
Very good point. Second one is the septic systems. We don't have, I don't believe John, the health officer,
Yeah,
goes out and tests people's
You,
septic systems on a regular basis.
No,
you
No.
can't do that.
if there's a complaint, yes.
Right, then he
Right.
addresses like immediately.
Right,
But there's no authority to just go regularly test or,
right.
I mean, actually inspecting a septic system is an expensive thing involving cameras.
Right. But I think that one of the ways we could get at it is to go to areas that might be susceptible to having failures and finding it in the surface waters and then tracing it backwards. In other words,
Well,
if you're,
I'm just, if I'm thinking in the cluster areas around lakes, that's gonna be,
right, but if you were to go to a small stream that's coming in, that comes down through a bunch of houses, right? You were to sample that stream and you were to find that it was high in nutrients and it might even have fecal coliform bacteria in it or something. We're not being proactive like that. We're
Right.
not doing that.
But also, for instance, one of the problems we have, I don't believe there is currently a sewage disposal place in town. We used to have a place that, and it was unfortunately right by the,
Oh, no, you don't want to do that. DES regulates that.
no, but Alton should have a place for all the residents of Alton. Otherwise, it's being dumped in other towns and other
Oh,
places.
no, yeah, you don't want to go there.
You want it to go to a wastewater treatment.
Yeah, they go to wastewater treatment plant.
Yeah,
So, okay, so Felix is, we're number one in the number two business, trucks, right? They take it to Dover potentially, or to, one of the big treatment plants that can handle it. And they put it in way upstream way up in the headwaters of the collection system. And so that it gets, because it's very strong, right? And it gets diluted by the time it gets down to the treatment plant. They hardly ever see that it causes a bump, because you're gonna upset the treatment plant if you dumped it directly in. But we do not do ground disposal of septic anymore. That's ancient history.
Okay,
On-site wastewater capacity is evaluated and properly addressed when structures are enlarged or use increases. That's pretty standard for us because if somebody's getting DES approval for a wastewater system, in the planning board, we always say, you know, you gotta have it, or John does it for a building permit. I think that's under control.
Okay.
Well, that's
As it stands,
not a reason to not have it though in here.
It's what?
So I should add the word continue to.
I think it's, yeah, I say ensure that, I say continue to do that because
Yeah.
it's pretty locked down at this point.
Yeah, so
What-
I'll change
what-
that to continue.
What fails is something that is really old and nobody is moving out or making any changes.
but doesn't it have to be checked if the house is being sold and you don't have proof of a new system?
It'll get picked up at that point, right?
Yeah,
The other thing might be is if, and this is in the Airbnb stuff and the VRBOs, that you all of a sudden take an old camp and put 15 people in there on a Saturday night.
Yeah.
You know,
And so prime picking is up at Hills Pond and Sunset Lake, which we are up there a lot. And so we had longtime customers who aged out, you know. Hills Pond is like this, if you don't know. So once they got older and then they moved closer to family, people that bought it don't live in it and they rent it out primarily. And they usually, and it sleeps 14.
right. Right.
The septic doesn't certainly sleep 14 different people every week.
I think
And then I
that-
got a call from somebody else up in that area because they're selling their home
So I
and their
think,
septic failed.
so I think the way she's gotten this written is okay then. Just thinking about that. Because we do have a good system right now.
Yeah.
But there is this problem. There's 300 VRBOs in town right now. And some of them are right down near the lake, you know,
What,
Verbo,
basin
oh,
rentals
those,
by
they actually
owner.
have commercials now. One's really cute, I'm sorry to
Not too
say,
hip.
but it's Jay-Z and Beyonce, me and my girlfriend, and it's an older couple vacationing. So it's actually really cute, but then I see it's Verbo, and I'm like,
Well, I mean, Guilford has been tying themselves up in knots about it, and we are too.
Yep.
So I think number 3 is probably okay.
okay. So 4 and 5, I have 2 typos. It's Lakes Lay Monitoring. I have that backwards.
Right, Lakes Lay monitoring, and that's,
And I have the explanatory stuff in 5 that goes in 4.
exactly.
Yeah,
That's what,
no, I see that. Yeah.
yeah, so you got my notes there?
But that's just a typo I'm seeing now. I don't have your notes. I didn't have time to open your.
Okay, well, that's,
file.
I've got them highlighted in yellow for you, and I have some
Yeah.
comments over on the side.
Yep.
Number 7, amend the zoning ordinance to provide for 100-foot vegetated shoreline buffer on lakes and rivers and perennial streams. And my question on that was, is that the overlay district? So you're not saying a vegetated buffer from lakes, rivers, and perennial streams and associated wetlands?
No, I'm not.
So this is just the water surface.
Yep. That's what I wrote. For
Yeah.
you to chew on and decide what you want, but I'm not saying in wetlands.
some people's lots are 100 feet wide.
Yeah, I mean, this is not going to be able to be applied to Lake Winnipesaukee, most likely, or any of the lakes, the ones that have cabins already on them.
Right, but one of the, I can give you examples that I've written that have conditional use permits for houses that are already there that want to enlarge or add even accessory buildings. It's not trying to stop anybody who's already there from doing anything.
Right. Well, that became a problem when we tried to do it down in Wyndham, and we had to do exactly that. You have to explain exactly how you're opted out, even though if you were starting from scratch, you wouldn't do this.
Right.
But that's the way it is, so. The town water stormwater management provisions in the zoning ordinance, site plan review regulations to ensure that consistent and cover all development disturbing and making impervious an area greater than 20,000 square feet. That's pretty much,
I think that the management and the maintenance has to be stressed.
Right.
That, as you said, some of the pavements and different things have to be cleaned. And a catch basin that's not cleaned out is no use.
I think that's noted in number 9.
Haven't gotten it.
Yep.
There you go.
And we actually talked about this at last night's planning board meeting.
yeah.
Yeah, I've started writing this, I mean, even though they have the stormwater maintenance and operation plans in their AOT permits with DES, I've started putting it in conditions of approval on site plans and subdivisions so that the town could step in if they don't see it happening.
So getting to the town stormwater management infrastructure, which Bob has some on Drew Hill Road in front of your house.
Mhm.
Yeah, by the way, I want you to come to my property after the snow's gone and
I'll
explain to me what I got.
I'll explain it to you.
No, in reading the document, and I'm trying to map that into what I have, I'm nothing but confused.
Okay. Well, we'll get you more confused. How's that? So the towns, I wrote this note to you, Tara. I said, there should be more on this one. Develop a comprehensive stormwater management plan as recommended by the Cyanobacteria Committee and more. Model after what Wolfboro has done. So there was a report done for what to do about all the outfalls that go into Mill Pond, for example. And how the catch basins are built and whether they should be deep sump catch basins and more retention areas and things like that.
So can you send me more narrative to put in the narrative to go with that so that when somebody gets to the action plan, they know what we're referencing?
Yeah, I'll give that a whirl, yeah.
Yep.
Any place where I see one of these, I'll try to go back and where I've made a suggestion, I'll try to go back and do something and,
Yeah, because we want to make sure the narrative supports the action plan.
yeah, gotcha.
That nobody's saying, well, where did this come from?
Right. No, it has to have a relationship. What might be useful is, I haven't looked at this in this way, but does it follow the sections of the chapter in order?
Hopefully, I can't guarantee it should, but
Yeah,
we should check for that.
Yeah, we try to do that, right?
It's the goal. It's a good goal. Hopefully I did it, but you can tell me if I missed it.
Again, about the wetlands, number 12, whether, 25 feet, 100 feet. We'll probably try to come out somewhere in the middle on that. I made a comment on that, whether it be WWPD or not. Aquifer Protection Overlay
Oh,
District.
wait, so down here, let's talk about some language for 12. Do you want to just add some language about tacked onto that consider strengthening the buffer, or just so the door is open?
I like your phraseology here, which is wetlands of any size that are contiguous with a perennial stream. So even though it's not 10,000 square feet, it's part of a running water. It should be protected.
Yes, but Russ,
All I would say 25 feet or more. Consider it. 25 feet's not much.
Or more is pretty big.
But it's 25 feet now. It's 25 feet now. So I'm referring to something you have already, but closing the loopholes in it.
It closes the loophole, but the setback ought to be reconsidered in my view, but.
Right, so we need some language that leaves the door open for that. If you wake up one day and discover that the town is supportive of 100-foot buffer from the wetlands, you want language in the master plan that allows that, so.
Yeah, we may have caught the lightning in a bottle only once on that one.
All right, well, you think on that and let me know.
13, I didn't have any problem with that. So on the number 14, I think, what did I say there? I was going to mention, maybe even put in to partner with various land trusts. And specifically, I was thinking of the Belknap Range Conservation Coalition, Lakes Region Conservation Trust, the Forest Society, and there are a couple others that we might, like Moose Mountains, we might partner with them. We're doing that, but
That-
just sort
So
of-
is that a note you sent me?
yeah, it's in the note, yeah.
All right. Just while I'm thinking of it, 1 second, owner. I think that Jessica, if you could sometime think about this responsibility column and get me your thoughts on that. I think you're in the best position to tell me, you know, whether I guessed at the right lead for each of these and who else in the town government and town office should be involved in them.
Okay,
Does that make sense?
yep, I can do that.
And I'm just kind of guessing, but I think you're the ground truthing on that. And there might be others that you know, would take the lead on and want to put yourself in. I didn't want to get in too much trouble, like volunteering you for all kinds of things.
I
So,
just take my name off everything, no.
and I think that Jean told me to put your name on all of them as the lead. So
Delegate.
I'd just rather be more comfortable if you looked at that column. for
Sure.
me.
Yep, I can do that.
You can spread yourself too thin.
So then 15,
So the stream crossing inventory, what that is the highway department is aware of this, is not creating, when they're redoing culverts, not to have a barrier for fish passage or aquatic passage.
Oh.
Because if the outfall comes out like this and it drops a foot or two, then
Yeah.
you've just cut that stream off.
Hmm.
And so a lot of things they're doing is like making open bottom culverts, half culverts
So
and allowing the stream.
amphibians can crawl through
yeah,
and
yeah, okay.
And so that's, I think the highway department is keyed into that already. I think.
Yeah, that's one of the things they rated them for, but one of the lenses as well in the form that they fill out when they're out there is also, is it designed in a way that it's apt to blow out in a big storm, or can it handle an extreme
Right.
weather event? So that's a whole other thing they're looking at, and the conditions. So the neat thing about these inventories is you can prioritize your culverts based on all these things. You can pick, you either can, so if it's town money, you might pick the culvert that's gonna help it not blow out, and it's gonna help the aquatic resource. But maybe you have a funder who only cares about the habitat, so you're gonna just look at the ones that it's gonna help the habitat. Or you have hazard mitigation money and you just want to look at the ones that are gonna blow out. That's the neat thing about that data.
But the thing about the hazard, repairing the hazard ones, you also probably solve for the aquatic
Right.
problem at the same time. So,
Yeah, it depends on the funder. There's the darn thing that we used to run into with DOT was that they wouldn't let you use their money to make it any better to make it any wider or any better for habitat. So you just kind of have to pick what you're trying to do by what your funding sources are. But I'd really like to see you I was just shocked to learn that they did the inventory and didn't give you any data or maps, and that you didn't even know it was there. I really want, if you could get maps out of your NRI, it's really helpful data.
yeah,
I've helped towns apply for, restoration money to do a handful of culverts at a time using that data.
so who, that should come from Scott Kinman, I would think. There's,
Yeah, I'm actually meeting with Scott and Courtney tomorrow at 10
maybe just ask
to
them.
go over
Yeah.
their
Who
section.
are, who are Scott and Courtney?
Scott Kinman, he's our Public Works Director, and Courtney Mitchell, she's our Assistant Public Works Director / Water Superintendent.
Okay, but I sent Russ the contact information for the person who has the data that I was in touch with Shane at DES who has the data.
Shane Kasicki, yeah, but
And he was expecting
what
to
I'm
hear-
saying to see if he may already have it.
Mhm.
That's what I'm saying, is Tom may already have it. But
I'm-
I can talk to Shane, I know him, so I can get him.
I didn't sound like anybody in the town did, but what I was hoping could happen is that Shane told me he'd be happy to give the data to your NRI people while they're doing these maps anyway, right?
Uh,
While they have the base map set up and all.
I don't know.
All right, you're going over my head with that acronym, NRI.
The Natural Resource Inventory.
Okay,
Right, you have a contractor making these nice big maps, and that's really the size and scale you want to see the stream crossing data at, with maybe a different sheet for each of those attributes that I was talking about.
All right, look at that.
But it's not doing anybody any good sitting at the ES. I mean, when I was involved in those, we made sure to go out to every town and have a meeting with the town boards and give them maps and the report and show everybody how to use the data, and then follow up, helping with grant application. So that DES is just going and filling in some of these holes without any of that outreach is a little disappointing.
I think on the number 16, wildlife friendly site design to applicants, I think you could also put Conservation Commission in there, because one of the things that we do have that wildlife mapping that we could,
Yep.
be willing to go out and talk to somebody.
Right,
And we do comment on
those department head reviews.
department reviews.
Yeah. Yep.
So I think that's it. So I will go back over this as an action thing and it's going to take me probably into next week, but what I'll do is go back and look up to see that it's all
In order.
in order.
Yeah, there's this other page, Russ. There's one more page here.
Oh, I didn't see it. Okay, I went down the wrong thing. Sorry. I thought there was more to this. Yeah, 17, education for homeowners, ways to be neighborhood conservation commission. That's actually what we were talking about.
Yeah, so then you're right there.
Okay, so this one here, 18, is that the ridgeline ordinance and steep
Yes.
slope?
Right.
So the encouraging owners of agricultural land to enroll in conservation programs. This is the forest and agricultural lands section, right? And that would be trying to participate in NRCS grants and through the Belknap County Conservation District.
Right.
Okay. Land use change tax to be collected at the appropriate times. I don't know about that. I don't know if that's a problem.
well, as long as it's monitored and that when you take a piece of land that's been put in current use, take it out of current use to develop it, you pay a penalty
Yes,
because you've been getting a real.
yes, because, right,
Yep,
yes, I
I know
didn't
the
know that.
assessing office is very, very diligent
I
I
with
was gonna
that.
say, I think they're all over that one.
Yep. Yeah,
I don't think,
Let's say continue to ensure then, just so
Yeah.
it's in there as a reminder, because a lot of towns, and it could change with different people on different boards or in the town, some towns run into a problem with whether to do it when somebody subdivides it or whether when they actually construct the road or sell the lots.
It's easy for us as people who have done it before, are familiar with it, but if somebody new comes onto a board, they have to be able to know about it enough to ask, what is this?
And read a whole bunch of guidance from DRA and,
Right.
yeah.
And then they try to get more money into the land fund, the conservation fund.
Because there certainly was, in the questionnaire, there was a lot of emphasis on protecting different places.
There was. And so is that something that would have to be a warrant article?
Yes, right. You'd have to change the formula by a warrant article.
And so we're set for this year, but that could be something that we could consider for next.
But I mean, the tricky part is that what you're doing is you're taking money that could offset tax money.
Correct.
So you're upping somebody's tax in a sense, perhaps minuscule.
Potentially.
There's some years that we've gotten big money out of. And there's some years you're not a whole lot.
Right.
So, it depends on what you want to put the most emphasis on. Do you want to have more scenery and more conservation land, or do you want to have a small reduction in your property tax?
Well, to me, that's
That's the fight that you have.
right. No, I get it. I get it. I get it.
Yep, so-
But the trick
But I
is,
think it's one worth putting out there, as I
Right.
guess is what I'm saying.
It really
Right.
depends on the makeup of the select board.
Well, I was gonna
Time.
say, and that is what it is, because then it will only get questioned at deliberative and then it will just go to the vote.
Right.
So,
If the select board, depends on how the political makeup of it is really, because it's really a political thing. It's
very,
crazy.
yeah.
Right.
So let me ask you this. How receptive do you think the current board would be?
I don't want to go there. at
Okay,
this point.
that's fine. We don't have to do that.
You can make a change next week.
Okay, then invasive species, that's something that the Conservation Commission can do. We have a Phragmites communis problem that I can take you to, and we can all pull weeds. And then the lighting requirements, let's review the lighting requirements in the site plan review regulations, sure they are adequate to protect towns. Did we do that?
So we're working on the site plans right now.
So if you leave
Oh,
that
we
in
will
there,
be-
this could get a check mark fairly soon.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a lot of,
early subdivisions or like storage buildings directly across the street from the one proposed last night.
Right,
Those lights shine right onto the road. They're terrible.
right. That was before we started.
No, oh, absolutely.
So did you have?
but so that's where number 24 comes in is
Right.
if you put it in the zoning, then it would affect
Yeah.
not the lights they already have, but if they replace the lights at some point.
Or, I just, as I drive by, I look at it, a stainless steel band across where the bulb actually is would keep the light from shining onto the highway.
So I guess what it would be is can the zoning ordinance, anything that planning can do
Retroactively?
to when things on pre-existing wear out and they're going to replace them, how do you get them to be educated to go to a different lighting system?
Right, and how would you enforce that?
Right. One of the things that's
The
happening
only
is
way
they're
to
going
enforce that
to,
would be the code officer.
yeah, you're going to
Right.
LED systems
Right.
now.
So it would have to be in an ordinance in order to enforce that.
Yeah, it goes in the ordinance as something they need a permit for.
So a permit, what, to replace your lights?
Right.
That's not gonna fly.
That
No.
sounds a little severe.
People are gonna ask what we've been doing up here.
But-
I'm not, you wouldn't want to apply it to homeowners, but commercials.
I think one of the things you could do is you could work with the contractors and educate people about the new systems that are available so that when you do go to replace your lights, maybe you never even thought about it, right?
There's a general attitude in this town of don't ask.
Yeah, but but if,
Wait till I catch you.
but I mean, if you make it a rule, then you
Sorry,
gotta
I didn't
enforce it.
know.
But if you could educate people to say, this is gonna save you money and it'll really help with dark skies.
Yeah, and the thing is now that it's easier to buy dark sky compliant lighting than not. It's so the norm now.
Right,
So lighting contractors, you don't have to educate.
right. So it might be something that we could put out to, all the commercial buildings in town at some point. They can do it through I don't know, something, some
Okay.
initiative.
So who would I put in the column? Then it wouldn't really be the planning board.
Why don't you do the building, code enforcement? He's also he issues COs and things like that. He always gives advice to
Right.
people all the time.
Okay, all right, I'll change 24 to be that.
I'm sorry, I missed that page. I think that's the end of that.
Good,
It is.
that's great.
Good job. Sorry.
Okay.
I apologize. Sorry.
Go with this.
So on the action plan format, Jessica will get back to me on responsibility. Those other goal columns, that's just my brain looking at it, right? You should all kind of, when you have a few minutes, walk yourself through it and see if you can if you could get to the same place or not, right?
Right. I would like to see the thing in a landscape format, maybe. Because it would just make it easier to look at, I think. I don't know.
Yeah, I started out doing that, but in the spreadsheet, but then when you put it in the plan document, right? People have to turn it. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Right.
Throw it, because it's gonna be in the back. It's gonna be an appendix, isn't it? Or something?
Well, no, it's the last chapter of the plan, not
Yeah.
appendix, but
But, and how is this gonna be bound? Is it gonna be a GBC bound or something?
that's beyond my scope for you. I get you to a draft right now.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah, but we could bind it that way, because then it's easier, it flops open. If it's bound with a hard spine,
Mm.
it's harder to use than almost like a ring binder type of thing, not ring binder, but
I
GBC,
think the wire ones work pretty well.
yeah.
So, and we may have discussed putting it in the infrastructure area, but I know we discussed the aquifer and then just the water downtown area. Is that something that needs to go in this part of the action plan anywhere, or is that in a different
It's up in the
chapter?
front part about it's basically number one,
Oh,
that's water supply and
Yeah.
wastewater.
I guess I was thinking about
So water supply and wastewater disposal, especially in the village, are married together.
yes. Okay.
As far as an action plan is concerned in the
Plan. Yes, okay, I'm sorry.
infrastructure
Yep,
section,
yep.
that's where we would propose that we get a consultant to
yes,
do a
that's, okay.
study.
Yep,
Yeah, look and see whether, first of all, really identify what the problem is. And then,
Right, but
and-
that would
yeah.
be something we'd have to go to the town meeting.
understood. Thank you.
okay. And photos,
Photos of what?
I've got scenic photos and things that I'm gonna develop, and I have a bunch in history too.
So I think in part of keeping it readable, anytime somebody's opened to 2 pages, assuming that you print it double-sided, you don't want both those pages to be all text, right? So you're gonna want some photos that illustrate some things like different iconic things in town, Point Jamaican, not just all scenic views.
Just as a
In
point,
the facilities chapter, I think you want to have a picture with each of the town buildings.
Right,
not many people know that during the bicentennial year, we actually had a photo committee, and they collected historic albums from many, many families in town and copied them. Where it's all stored, I don't know. but it's a resource that people should know about at least. We need to track it down somehow. I don't know. The only person I know who's still in town who was on it was Sylvia Countway.
How about
But
Marty?
so right now, what, we need some photos like of the lake and streams and the marsh, the things we've talked about in the natural resource chapter, for example.
I have a lot of those.
We're gonna need, you know, some more of the scenic. I'm gonna need some of different parts of town for land use. And again, the facilities, and I felt like somebody volunteered for this at the beginning, but I don't have in my notes who that might have been.
To take pictures?
Well,
Well,
that was Amy.
That was Amy.
so maybe what we can do is I can generate what I can generate, okay? And then you can just see whether there's other things. I won't have anything on facilities, but we can get some, maybe you can assign Amy to take pictures of all the facilities or something like that.
Yeah, she was, because that was part of her, part of the plan, I
Right.
think,
think
was
so.
that. Yeah, it was
Like the-
facilities.
The pump house,
Yeah.
the well house.
To answer Tom's question, I think Marty Nielsen
Yeah.
would have those pictures, I would imagine.
I don't know if he does. I've mentioned it to him before and I don't know if he's actually tracked them down.
Well, I don't think that's crucial.
I
to
mean,
our
they were kept
purpose.
in the vault or something. It was a huge supply, so they made pictures and negatives.
Would Nancy
Yeah.
Merrill know?
Yeah,
Would Nancy Merrill know?
Conceivably.
yeah. I think we need to figure out what we actually need because
Yeah, I
we're
understand.
talking about maybe on the whole document, maybe 20 pictures or 24, no more than that, probably, right, Tara?
Right.
Yeah, so.
So then, so we'll check for photos for this chapter is what we
Yeah.
need the photos for.
I can probably do most of this one. I wouldn't
Yeah.
worry about it. Because I've done a bunch of presentations. I got water. I got
I'm sure you have
marshes, I
more
got
than enough. I bet you do.
tons of- So let me just try to generate that. Now you won't have to worry about it. Now why don't you guys worry about the other chapters? And get Amy to go for whatever.
Yeah.
And then maybe the fire department might have some good stuff with their trucks or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
just stick them in there for color. And then, yeah. Are you thinking about having anything, do you want us to try to dream up something for the cover of this thing?
Yes.
Okay,
No, you do some iconic photo, or we could do a collage with like 3
Plane
photos.
landing on the ice runway.
one of the really neat pictures we have is this guy named John Geises, who does drone pictures. And he has some fantastic pictures of Alton Bay taken from about 1,000 feet up.
Wow.
And it shows the village and everything. It's
Nice.
pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Drone
I think
photos.
I used one, I have one of his pictures as the, whatever, the wallpaper on the ABA page. It's the downtown,
Yeah,
area, just because you don't get a lot of downtown area.
yeah.
And I mean, really great shots.
So why don't we try to, I think I have the one that was taken that includes the bay and a big view. Let me try to find that. You can get yours and then we'll just put them in the till and figure out which one we
Okay,
want to use.
sounds
And then
good.
if we
Yeah.
do one of his, we have to give him credit for
Yes.
it. And we may have to pay him for it, but I don't know.
Yeah, be sure and send me, when you send me photo, I mean, you could just dump them all to me and I can kind of take a crack at what goes where and what we use. Just make sure you tell me who the credits are for all of them.
Right, what the source is and what the picture is of.
Right.
Okay.
I think it'd be really good to have a couple of some of the activities like the winter carnival and the thing you did last summer to put in where we talk about the small town feel,
Yeah,
events and people knowing each other. I think a couple of pictures like that would be good.
Okay.
I
Like,
think
Not just stuff, but
an aerial picture of the winter carnival that somebody took.
then
Yeah.
if
we have a video
you
of
just
the winter carnival.
you just have to make sure if there are any recognizable faces in it, then you need their permission.
right. Try not to do.
Mhm.
Yeah, try not to do. That's what I do.
Just put a thumbprint over it.
Yeah. Yeah, we had drone footage of the Winter Carnival this year. It was really great video. If anybody,
Yeah, and
if you
the
haven't seen it, you should
planes
check it
taken
out.
off and stuff.
Yeah,
I saw it on
it was,
Facebook.
it came right over the bay. It was a lot of on ice stuff, but just, I mean, it was gorgeous. It was
Is that
so
on the
sunny. It was
ABA
a
site?
beautiful day. So, I'm sorry.
Is that on the ABA site?
It
Yeah,
is,
okay.
and it's probably right in the event page. So,
All right.
There was some good, I saw some on Facebook too. And
yeah, I actually shared it. Well, the ABA shared it to the Bay, the community, the Alton Bay community page.
Right.
And another community page. So it's out there somewhere.
Those, I just can't harvest from those because the resolution won't be good enough, so.
Okay.
Mm.
Okay. So then, number 4, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm taking over already.
It's okay. MPC, that's called the Master Plan Committee, volunteers. We were looking for more volunteers.
Well, no, this was, yeah, you probably are looking for all the volunteers, but this, I wanted to just see how people were doing on the infrastructure homework, because I haven't seen any outlines or preliminary drafts or gotten any questions or anything, so I'm getting a little worried.
You'll get us on the IT stuff probably next week or the week after.
Yep, and like I said, I'm meeting with Scott and Courtney tomorrow.
Where are we going to be using volunteers? Are we going to have subcommittees to go over these things or what?
I wasn't looking for more volunteers.
Okay.
I
She
was,
wants to know how we were doing.
Right.
Oh.
She wanted to know how we
Right.
were doing with our homework.
These volunteers.
Yeah.
yeah, I just wanted to know how you, but I'm doing land use, but you guys are doing infrastructure, transportation, recreation, and I just wanted to, it's been really
I know.
quiet.
I'm on recreation and I will start now that Winter Carnival is over. So I have not even started, but I will. And it was on my date because after Winter Carnival, that was my to-do.
Right.
One of the voluntold things that we may have to do, I don't know, this is a question for you, Jess, is the town council. Does he have to review the document before we go to publication?
No. I've never heard of a town council reviewing a master plan.
No,
No, because it doesn't have any.
Okay.
no.
Just-
So,
I don't think so, yeah.
so who was doing,
It might be a good courtesy.
I think it'd be a waste of money.
Yeah, I
I think so,
think
considering
I'd stay away from it, Tom.
That was the first thing I thought.
Oh, he's on retainer.
we don't have an attorney on retainer any longer.
Oh, no?
No,
Quit.
welcome back
It's
to
It's
town.
not, it's just not an appropriate thing. It's not regulatory.
Talk to you after.
Um,
Missed that side.
I'll talk to you after.
so we've moved the schedule off a little bit because the NRI held Russ up. So that buys facilities a little bit of time because I'll be doing land use for April 6th instead of us discussing infrastructure. April 6th, we'll be talking about land use. But my thought in talking about additional meeting dates was that I guess I would feel better if we penciled in a second meeting date that would be a regular meeting date for like April, May, June, and July. And because we'll have some second drafts to look at, we'll have a catch-up meeting because of the one we missed. I want to make sure that we get done on time when you wanted it in the summer. And I looked at my calendar, and if we met at 4 p.m., I'm totally wide open the second half of the month. So the third or fourth weeks, April, May, June, July. And I was hoping that we could just, all of us put a regular meeting date on a calendar. And if we don't need it, we cancel it. But that way, if we don't, like land use, we might not get through that in one meeting. That's a big deal.
Right.
Right.
So it'd be good to already have the overflow meeting kind of scheduled and without putting the infrastructure discussion off to June. We'll want to be getting on that by May and.
Okay.
What are you thinking of, like the 20th or the,
You guys tell me, I'm any day in the third or fourth weeks of those months, I can meet at 4 o'clock. Any
Fine.
day.
And what I was gonna say was I would ask Jessica, because she probably has the fullest schedule out of
Yeah,
all of us.
So it looks like either the 20th or the 27th in April is good.
Okay,
So whatever works best for you people.
yeah, I think,
I am open, so.
But can we, like, say, let me get my calendar. So, so you're looking at Wednesdays. Could we say if it's the third Wednesday, that it's the third Wednesday in April, May, June, and July?
sure.
Let me double check.
Because if we do that, that just makes it easier for me to
Yeah.
plug in other towns, right? With knowing that I'll have that for you.
I like to do that as well. Like for this, I always know that this meeting is the first Wednesday, boom, I already block it off, but it's not always that easy.
But that's why I'm down to like 4 o'clock, because I have just, a lot of evenings. And then I looked at the evenings I have free, and you don't have them. You have planning board or select board meetings on the ones I have free. So that's how I landed on 4 o'clock.
All right, so my calendar and the town's calendar is free on the third Wednesday of every month from up until July.
Get out.
Let's do it. At 4 o'clock?
Sounds good.
Yeah, I think if we shut these doors, because there'll still be town business going on from 4 to 4:30.
Right,
So if we shut these doors,
Or,
That may not
well,
be-
we can't meet downstairs because we don't have the recording system.
there is a recording system, but then you're blocking off the access to the file
Files.
rooms
No,
and
this is
stuff.
better.
Yeah, I would agree. We'll just. stay
And
up
we
there.
don't have the Zoom capability to have Tara join us downstairs. You have to set up.
So
the
then
whole-
do we want to just say
projector
the
and
third?
the
So we'll just do
screen
the first and third
First and third
Wednesday
Wednesdays
of
of every month
e-
at
April,
4
May,
p.m.
June. Okay,
at 4 p.m.
okay, 4 PM. That's important to note, 4 PM. The third one is at 4 PM. The first Wednesday is 6.
Correct. Yep.
And we all go out to JP China after. Oh,
Well, you used to be able to, right?
That's being rebuilt, by the
I
way.
know.
I just want them to have live music where you can dance.
That's what- Okay.
Okay,
So I think we got a little bit of flexibility over the schedule we said. We had said everybody needed to get me infrastructure stuff by March 18th. But I think if you had it by the end of March, because we're gonna talk about land use in April, that lets me be thinking about land use with you, but working on infrastructure for the May meeting.
So we have no more meetings this month.
Right.
Correct.
Right, I need the time to work on the land use section,
okay.
but I think we had put on the schedule March 18th for infrastructure from Hallmark, but I think if everybody got it to me by the end of March, then we're okay.
Okay. So that sounds good. Public input?
And who,
Come forward.
there's some people not there though, who were working on some of these sections.
Is Amy working on anything?
I believe that Amy and I both said we would work on our thing after Winter Carnival,
Oh, I see, okay.
which is why land use was for April. I think that's what we did because you were working on your part and then Tara was gonna work on land use because Amy and I needed that time because we just
I know, it came out great.
had too much. Thank you.
Somebody else was doing transportation.
Was that Paul?
So Paul was doing, yes, transportation and water. So that's now me and Amelia.
Unless we get him to come back.
I don't know what's going on.
Okay, so
Or whoever.
And then, but who was doing the other facilities, like town office and?
Amy was doing facilities, I thought. I'm
Okay.
doing rec and I thought Paul was doing transportation and water.
Who's Jill? I have Jill written down
Who's
here.
that? She's the community volunteer. She's come just a couple of times.
Okay,
She's
Yeah, I don't
interested
know
in the
where
trail
she was
systems.
tonight.
Yeah, I drive by her house. She's in Gilman's Corner area.
so Kelly, you would be included her in talking about trails if she was interested.
Yes, and we did discuss it at the last meeting, I believe, as we were leaving, that we might get together and chat. Yes.
Okay. Okay, so, does somebody, so Amy, if you could, somebody could let Amy know that end of March is good.
End of August?
End of March.
March.
End of March instead of March 18th.
Okay.
So we've got the 6th, the 20th in April, and then 2 in May, 2 in June, 2 in July. And then we'll see where we're at that point.
Sounds good.
And so we just really need, try to get some help on transportation and water.
Is Paul still, will that depend upon whether he gets elected or not?
That's what he
Yeah.
said. Yeah, that's
Why
what
don't
he
we see
said.
how the 8th goes?
So, I had sent out some guidance on the different sections. Should I send transportation and water over again and send them to you, Jessica, or did I copy you when I wrote him?
You copied me on that, and I've already sent that information over to Scott and Courtney to kind of do a preliminary view as to, well, kind of what we're gonna be talking about.
Okay, good.
Just so that, yeah, so they know what's expected tomorrow.
Yeah, so they can be prepared. That's all.
I had-
Yeah, good thinking.
In the, I had written up some stuff that actually helps with water. Tara took it out of my section about the wells and how much they produce and all that kind of stuff.
Okay.
Yeah, I thought that should go into infrastructure.
That part has a start on it anyway.
That's good.
Perfect.
Do you want me to, I can make a note to send that to you, Jessica.
Yeah, that'd be helpful.
You need anything else, Tara?
No, I'm good. You and I will follow up on some of these gaps.
Yeah, I'll be able to dig into that this weekend probably.
So Amy is to have the municipal buildings by the end of March. Is that what it was?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, we really gotta get that going.
It seemed like, the stuff that Jessica did for the building committee,
Yeah, I was gonna say that's kind of done. Yes, yes.
yeah, covered.
That is
Covered.
Great information.
Yes, yes, it is.
Probably
And that's
most of
why
it.
she said that she could do pictures
Yeah.
because she had a lot of that information already.
Yeah.
But I just want to make sure that I bring that to her
Yeah, and
attention.
that's still located in that Dropbox.
Okay.
I
Oh,
just
and
like
also,
that, like that stuff in time to get back with some questions and then make a revision before I send it out. So,
yep,
and
I
Arch will give me a chance to do that.
Okay.
I did want to note, especially to Russ, that hazard mitigation plan is in Dropbox.
Okay,
It's a 2017, but I know that they're going to be updating it at sometime soon, and they're going to have it live on the website somewhere at some point. So I talked to Ryan about that already,
so it's in
because it's
the
not on the website currently.
hazard mitigation.
I mean, it has some sensitive information in it, so contact people, cell phones, things like that.
Where is it?
Hazard mitigation.
Yeah, it says right there.
Yeah.
Okay,
So-
all right. I think the agendas are just about done, folks.
Okay.
Anything else?
I don't think so.
See you,
Gotta have public input.
yeah. All the mice. We'll see you, Tara.
Thank you, Tara.
Yeah, good night. Have a good month.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Let's do an official adjournment.
The way I do it is the agenda is over, so we're done.
Okay.
Not saying a word.
And that occurred at 8:35.